Hello, you're watching Context. I'm Orkan Amashov here. The ever-fluctuating jigsaw puzzle of the Middle East continues to swirl with regional and global actors drawn into southern Syria, where clashes between Druze militias and Bedouin tribes have led to a military intervention by the central government in Damascus. Israel, claiming the mantle of the protector of the Druze community, responded by striking the Syrian capital, targeting several government buildings. Following the US intervention, a new ceasefire was attained and has since remained in force. Syria's interim president Ahmed al-Shara, in a televised address to the nation, stated that while his country is not afraid of war, it has chosen to place the welfare of its people above chaos and destruction. In line with the newly announced ceasefire, the Syrian army is currently withdrawing its troops from Suwayda, a flashpoint city in the country's south. Joining me now to discuss these portentous developments is Anna Evans, political analyst, speaking to us from Lisbon, Portugal. Thank you very much indeed for joining us,
Hello,
Anna.
Orkan.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. My first question is going to be about the assumption to what extent actually Ahmed al-Shara needed this situation. How realistic is it that Ahmed al-Shara, after visiting Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, and holding talks with Israeli officials, and this coupled with his reported intention to join the Abraham Accords, might have provoked the tensions with the Druze community, prompting an Israeli reaction, which is probably the last thing he needs now?
Exactly, Orkan. It is not a very good news for the new regime, and it is first and foremost a continuation of the sectarianism that was so harmful in the life and politics of Syria before the fall of the Assad regime. So first and foremost, this is a signal that there are foreign interests that are enticing the civilian unrest in Syria, which is, as you so well said, the last thing that the Syrian government wants, especially because it needs stability vis-à-vis its neighbors and Israel, of course. And so it is a moment where the United States also has a very strong interest and has played a very strong role in taming the tensions and working towards a ceasefire that would bring the issue towards a resolution. And this is really very important because the approximation, the rapprochement between Syria and Israel signals a kind of stability for the region, which is also critical for Israel. In order to make absolutely certain that the corridor that used to come from Iran and supplying Israel's rivals at his doorstep does not operate. It is also crucial for Israel to guarantee that the buffer zone that it is trying to sustain around the Golan Heights prevails. And the city and the region where these clashes with the Druze are being held or have taken place is too close to the Golan Heights and too close to Jordan, and Israel cannot risk in any way, having rebel forces that are somehow sponsored either by Turkey or by Iran or other foreign external pressures, using this proximity to Jordan and to the Golan Heights, to destabilize the buffer zone that Israel is trying to sustain. And so this is really a very critical moment. for all regional players and for the United States as well, because it is in the United States' interest that Syria is stable, that the new government keeps cooperating with US intelligentsia and US interests in the region, and that, no foreign turbulence is stimulating further, dissent like this. And as we know, the Druze community is quite important in the region. It is important in Syria, in Lebanon, in Israel, and in the Golden Heights. And the Druze community has been persecuted throughout history. Although it is considered an offspring of Shiite Islam, we know the Druze do not regard themselves as Muslims, but they have, because of their specific beliefs, been subject to so much persecution that this is again one more very serious situation for the Druze community.
Allow me to, Anna, with your permission, allow me to inquire about this community in a very specific way, about the circumstances involving them. In one sense, only in one sense, they themselves appear to be radical in their own way and very leery of Syria's new rulers, the government in Damascus. On occasion, they even appear to be radicalized by Israel and used by Israel as a pretext to interfere in Syria's internal affairs. But surely this cannot be the whole picture. There's something else that we need to understand. And pray continue.
Right, Håkan. I think you're very much to the point. There is this discussion about to what extent is the Druze community being used by Israel itself to expand its leverage over Syria, especially over southern Syria and the border with Jordan and with the Golan Heights. So that's one of the arguments, is that Israel is actually using the interests of the Druze community to sponsor its own interests. And we know that the Druze community within Turkey, the Druze community within Syria has great suspicion towards government, a great deal of suspicion. And there are cleavages within the Druze community between its leaders vis-à-vis the Syrian government. So the posture of Druze leaders in the southern Syria region, where they dominate, it goes from being cautious towards the government to being radically opposed to the Syrian government. And so this is something that the United States has been working in its intense diplomatic efforts to approximate, the Syrian government intervention from the Druze leaders, or putting it in other words, to build some fabric of trust, which is really lacking at this point. And this comes from the historical persecution of the Druze and their historical minority status and underground status during the Assad, the previous regime. So it is part of the fragmented sectarian characteristics of Syria. Now, within Israel, we know that in Syria there are around 500,000 Druze. It is rather like half of the Druze community in the world. In Israel, there are around 150,000 Druze. They are more than that in Lebanon. But Israel has a very synchronistic relationship with its Druze community. So the Druze are part of the military service, the military corps in Israel, they are also in high-level positions in the public administration. Very prominent positions are actually occupied by the Druze, minority, and political ones in the justice system as well, and in the military system. So, of course, there is also a real element of truth in saying that the Druze community plays an important role within Israel. It represents about 8% of the Arab community in Israel and 2% of the overall population, but it is very well represented in high-level positions within the state apparatus in Israel. And so it is important that the aims of this community are heard, but obviously Israel has a very critical interest in supporting the role of the Druze and their political leverage in southern Syria and, in the areas that are nearer the Golan Heights and nearer Jordan.
Well, it looks like that on the basis of what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu articulated a few months ago, actually, long before the current developments, the Israeli thinking is based on the idea that south-west of Syria must be a buffer zone, that the government of Damascus should exercise no control over that territory. And clearly the government of Ahmad al-Shara, as any government, as any sovereign country, needs to entrench at some point its positions in southern Syria, in order at least to avoid the possibility of sectarian groups clashing or operating amidst that vacuum of a collapsing state, because there is no Syrian state in that part of the country. That's very clear to us. And it looks like that Israel is not helping by means of reacting in a way it did react. But also, of course, there's a complex issue revolving around Druze community and Israeli interests surrounding that particular community. And also what seems to be the case is that any policy that holds al-Shara, Ahmad al-Shara, responsible for forces he doesn't control, because he doesn't control those Bedouin forces, would not strengthen him. And the question here is about the future of Syria and its present. Does a disintegrated Syria serve Israel at this moment? But it definitely serves Iran. There's no doubt about that. But does it serve Syria, Israel as well? Because after all, there have been some talks, twofold. The one element was to make sure that Israel and Turkey do not collapse in Syria. And also Syria, the government of Ahmad al-Shara has taken some steps to ensure that they could join Abraham Accords at a later stage. There seems to be some sort of will on the side of Syrian government. Do you think Israel is helping this cause as well?
Orkan, I think that's the very, very core of the troubles. Every time there is some approximation, some rapprochement between an important Arab country and Israel, or in this case, between Syria and Israel, there is an immediate reaction to tilt the regional balance of power backwards again. So Iran has no interest in the proximity between Arab states and Israel. So it is, as you so well said, very much in Iran's interest to destabilize the government of Syria, also because Iran, as we know, has lost leverage over this new government. So the more fragmented the government is, the less it is capable to pursue its core sovereignty missions of, number one, defending its population, number two, providing welfare in a unified state with order and peace. And so if the new government in Syria cannot do this, of course, the leverage of foreign countries will be much higher. But as you so well said, it is in Israel's interest that the government of Syria maintains the capacity to stabilize the country and to keep the order in the country. And so it is obviously not in Israel's interest to stimulate fragmentation within the country. But then, as we know, this new wave of dissent started because Druze was attacked by Sunni Bedouins, Arab Bedouins. And when the first forces that were sent by the Syrian regime to quell the conflict, the Druze understood or assumed that the government forces were there to harm them. And so they still do not trust in a centralized government that is supposed to protect them, and to allow for order and stability. And so I think, yes, it is very correct what you say. All the minority sectarianism benefits, the Iran's interests without any doubt. And the United States' role in diplomacy at this point is first and foremost to fabricate trust. Because only through trust can these forces, cooperate with the central government. And it is very hard to knit trust when the history is one of distrust and fear and suspicion. So this is the great problem that, the great power, the US as a great power, is facing to help its ally Israel. And it is also a problem because Turkey also wants leverage as a regional power over Syria. And Turkey has some interests in maintaining not a very centralized order in some parts of Syria. On the other hand, it wants a very centralized order in other parts of Syria. And so, the puzzle here is how to put the pieces together so that the neighbors are pacified and the internal politics becomes more united. Otherwise, we go back to Assad's civil war times, and that, of course, is not in the interest of civil society in the country and of the United States or Israel or Turkey in a number of areas of the Syrian country. So I think this is the big conundrum. Every neighbor is interested in expanding somewhat its influence and leverage over the country, but there is a very fine and delicate balance between the need for order and what the consequences will be for the neighbors if there is disorder, which is what we've been witnessing now. And yes, to go, to wrap up with your question, it is really sad and dramatic that every time there is some proximity between Arab countries and Israel and some attempt to expand the Abraham Accords, we immediately notice, the sudden explosion of dissent and killings and conflict. And as we all remember, unfortunately, this also happened before the October 7th attacks from Gaza to Israel.
Before the October 7th,
which obviously...
Before that tragedy, of course, Saudi Arabia and Israel, they had been normalizing their relations. Turkey and Israel had been mending their relations. And after that, all that seemed to have collapsed. And now it looks like there has been there's one particular speculation, of course, that the remnants of Assad regime and some of the Iranian operatives functioning, operating within southern Syria might have engineered something of this nature in the context of clashes between Bedouin tribes and Druze community. It is a mere speculation, but it's part of that very picture of Iran actually doing something at a moment when there is a degree of commonality emerging between Israel and Turkey. And of course, the picture is very, very complicated. Before the 8th of December, naturally, the actions taken by Turkey and Israel on the ground seem to have led to the collapse of the government of Bashar al-Assad. But since then, since 8th of December, there had been clashes on the ground in Syria. There had been some efforts to make sure that Turkey and Israel do not reach that confliction point, and Azerbaijan, of course, naturally played some sort of role in that process. But it's a very complicated picture, and it's an evolving picture, of course, and it was a great delight to discuss all of these intricate elements with you, Anna. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Orkan.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, that was Anna Evans, political analyst. Together we examined some of the key developments in southern Syria and examined and assessed the prospects of the new ceasefire holding. See you very soon.